I mean, it's extraordinary. I mean, we set out to make an art film, and to have it just be as accurate as anything that had ever been come before. It's a really great testament to not only our team, filmmaking team, but certainly the astronauts that worked with us, the families, all the wonderful folks back at NASA and National Archives. It's just a really great story of teamwork for all of us to get together to make the film possible.
Take me back to the very beginning stages for you when you realized you were sort of at the base of this Mount Everest. What was your step one when you understood the scope of what it was you were going to have to do to make this possible?
Well, you can't make a film about Apollo 11 or any of space movie in my mind without kind of casting a wide net. We made a little short film about Apollo 17 where we kind of played with narrative structure. We wanted it to kind of feel like you were going on this mission, going on the ride with the guys that were doing it. We'd had some things transferred, some film for back then. I wasn't really happy with the results, so when this came up, Apollo 11, we said we want to rescan everything. We want to know what's available out there within the whole spiderweb of NASA, National Archives, private collectors, everywhere. So in doing that, somebody really had my back on that, which was our post-production facility here in New York. Was getting into the film scanning business. At the same time, a lot of companies were getting out of it because it's film. So they were deploying some newer technology that would allow us to not only scan it in very high resolutions, but also we didn't really care what gauge the film was. So not to get too technical, but it didn't matter if it was 8mm, 35, 16, whatever, 65, 70, we didn't care because everything rode on a cushion of air through the actual scanner. It wasn't really, in the past, it was these pull-down claws, if you think like film sprockets moving along.
Totally.
We didn't have to rely on that. So when we basically proposed to NASA and National Archives, we wanted to redo everything because it really hadn't been a good effort to update all this quality in so long. They naturally saw our project as a vehicle to do that, to update things. And that began a long process of research, how much is out there. And then probably about 3 or 4 months into it was this discovery. I got an email actually from one of the archivists at National Archives and said, look, we have this pile of large format films. They say Apollo 11 on them. Some of them had the dates of, around the launch of July 16, 1969, but we have no idea what's on them.
That's wild. When you think, especially having seen the film and understanding the full gravity of this moment in time, the significance within the moment in time for humanity, that there was just a pile of film that, well, we don't know what it is. Might have to do with that time we went to space. I don't know. The first time we went, I don't know. It could be. Might not. I don't know. And so you find this out. You get all this. How far in... I'm curious about the evolution of the project, because you get this discovery, you find out all this amounts of data that wasn't available to you before. Do you know from that point immediately that you're going to be able to do this in such a way that you don't need talking heads, you don't need all the usual documentary tropes, that you have enough here, audio and video-wise, that you can tell this story just with the first-hand stuff that you have?
Yeah, I mean, I knew that even before the large format stuff.
Okay.
It was, we were... I mean, in fact, even though I think other members of the team were very excited by this, I was, of course, just being a fan, trying to constantly be a student of cinema. I'm a giant fan of these large format films from the 40s or from the 50s and the 60s that predate IMAX films. So there was all these wonderful films, not the Hollywood films, but these films that were shown in like science centers, museums, expos, where they would shoot Cinerama, 3 cameras, 3 projection systems, do cut downs, crazy split screens. They'd play with like fractured narrative, and they were doing whispered narration 30 years before Terrence Malick was. So I was always a fan of those. They're hard to find, and I kind of thought maybe that's what some of this stuff was. It was just some guys kind of screwing around down there. And then we got the first. We got 2 reels were brought up to test with, basically. I didn't see what was on them. And the first one that we saw was, and by the way, the scanner was a prototype, so it was built specifically for this project. That first test reel, I'll never forget it. Gives me chills even talking about it. the data rates were so big that we would just see like on a monitor just every 3 or 4 seconds an image.
Yeah.
And what we saw was the Saturn V on the crawler going out to the pad. And it was flipped upside down because the image had been V-wound. So we're all craning our necks to look at it, and we're like, our jaws are on the ground.
Yeah.
But what was more astonishing was it wasn't just a camera that was on the ground, it was actually in a helicopter, so it was an aerial shot. So we were just floored that someone was, had these large format cameras, not on the ground, but in a helicopter, and they actually had some production value to them.
Yeah.
And then the second reel was the guys getting suited up the day of the launch, and it was just, it was like a religious experience. We digitized it very quickly, ran around the corner, put it up on the big screen, and nobody said a word for like a half an hour. We were just floored,
That's the part I was thinking. As soon as you said like you're looking at the every 3 frames come in, I'm like, all right, how much time transpires between that moment and when they put it on the biggest screen they can
About
possibly
28 minutes. The
That's
longest 28
amazing.
minutes of our careers.
You like bundle it up, quick, let's go, run next door, and you throw it up there. That's amazing, man. Yeah, especially when they're getting suited up to something. So, like, yeah, we could talk all day about, of course, the obvious, which is this is gorgeous and it transports you in time, but also seeing their faces that large and seeing the gravity of this moment and like understanding. There's so many little details that are woven throughout this that are either lost because I've only ever seen the footage or similar footage on TV or something like that, and not at this level of clarity and stability and all that sort of stuff. So, okay, so you establish, I'm going to tell this, no talking heads, I'm going to do this and that. When do you decide, because I could be wrong about this, but outside of the credits, and there's only one other instance where there's something that wasn't shot then. It's the basic digital, the very basic animations to illustrate like how they're going to maneuver and stuff. Was even that a concession of like, were you trying to stay pure, like we have all this stuff, is there a way to not have to add anything? What was the mission once you realized what you had?
Yeah, we definitely wanted to kind of keep it in its purest form without anything. Just kind of that dogma of direct cinema. We're not all the way there with this project because we do introduce score. We're not fly on the wall. We have sound design and the animations, but. One of the things early on once we found this imagery, we were constantly, we began the process of researching, where the hell did this stuff come from? Like, who shot this? Who, just where and why? And the current thinking was, I was enough of a space geek to know that there was a cult classic out there called Moonwalk 1. It was funded by NASA. It was shot and produced by a really great large format company called Francis Thompson Company. Francis Thompson himself was supposed to direct this. The director was this guy, Theo Kamika, who was an editor on previous Thompson films. And NASA commissioned it. At one time MGM was involved, but they came to the Apollo 11 launch. They shot a little bit in the control room, and then they were there for the recovery. And it's a great little art film. NASA knew that the world was saturated with Apollo 11 50 years ago, so they just wanted a time capsule. So they went out and got these really great artists to shoot this stuff. These beautiful scenes on the beach in and around the launch pad.
Oh, those are great.
And he went out and shot all that stuff. But those guys, in conjunction with a couple of NASA hired through Technicolor cameramen down there, were running around with these large format cameras, and it just wasn't the Moonwalk 1 guys were, their artistry was apparent in all the Apollo 11 footage.
Was it pretty clear that you just had Apollo stuff to work with, or was a large part of it just not identifying simply when it happened, but what is this?
It was pretty random. But luckily, NASA was great. We had just great consultants. Our archive producer, Steven Slater. We basically went out and got like the best nerds in the business to analyze this stuff, to look at exactly what it was. If you put yourself back in the late '60s, early '70s. The Apollo program, everything happened in a very protracted amount of time. So some reels you would see a launch of Apollo 11, and then on the same reel they would be wheeling out Apollo 12 on the pad. So things were happening very, very quickly. So it's really a story, as far as the footage is concerned, of archive preservation. The fact that there was a system put in place by NASA and the National Archives as the end repository to develop this film, get it out, physically just make dubs of it and get it out to the various NASA facilities, and then put it in cold storage, and put it there until technology would come along, or somebody like myself would be interested in utilizing.
There's a couple of moments, twice I think, on the burn and then on the landing, you guys superimpose and synchronize velocity or fuel levels, all these different elements, all this data that obviously you had to have received from NASA. Talk about synchronizing all of that, like synchronize not only the footage with that data and with the audio and all that stuff. Was that just a matter of getting some of the smartest guys you could find to help you put it together? And what did that feel like the first time you saw it all? Like, we've done it, this is it, this is everything in real time, this is what happened.
Yeah, I mean, my job's kind of easy. I mean, I edited it, but it was more of like just taking the best stuff of what all the other team members were working on,
Nice,
and just
yeah.
putting it together. And so it's really, hats off to them. Our archive producer, Steven Slater, talk about just tedious work. None of the footage in Mission Control has audio on it. It's not.
Really?
It was not shot with any sound. So the early Apollo missions, there's no sound on any of that. The later ones, 15, 16, 17, there was. So for 11, what he would do, and he's been spending most of his adult life doing this, is taking the air-to-ground transmissions and lip-syncing it to all of the guys in Mission Control. And not only that, when you see the original reels, which we scanned, it's just a cluster of like, they had 2 camera guys, and they would, each one had like 2 Aries cameras with these 200-foot daylight spools, and they would like on off the camera in like 10-second bursts, put one down, and grab one, go over here, get another one. The other guy's racing, he's getting just beauty shots of if somebody was talking, So Steve, if you were lucky, on one of those reels, they would like pan up to like one of the clocks, and then pan down to a face, and then you could sync off of that clock and maybe get the audio. But 9 times out of 10, it's just listening and just by sheer repetition, just trying to get it, matching their lips. So a lot of the archives come from MIT, and then our sound designer Eric Milano. We were set out to hire this giant team, but we worked so long on the project. Typically, you go out, you hire like a sound designer and a mixer and a re-record mixer and a Foley artist and all this stuff. We just worked so long on it that Eric ended up wearing all of those hats. And outside of our IMAX audio mixer, Brian Eimer, they were the only 2 people that touched this as far as the audio goes, with sound effects, taking like the sound of a Saturn V rocket. I mean, that took us years to perfect. We got lucky in that we partnered with Air and Space down at Smithsonian on the IMAX screen, so we could develop scenes, go down there, test it, play it for for the astronauts and their families, play it for people that were there. Proximity editing was a big thing with Eric. What does it sound like? What did the Saturn V sound like 2 miles away? What does it sound like if you were on the Banana River on a boat and you were Rick and Mark Armstrong with Neil's wife Janet? What did that sound like? What did it sound like from a helicopter? What did it sound like from a plane? Shots of planes, aerials. So it's just a tremendous sound design and sound editing work that Eric did, for sure.
And it is beautifully done. Like, that's why I love having this chance to sit down and talk to you, because when you watch it, it's one of those things where if you did your job right, it looks like you did nothing at all. You know what I mean? Where it's like all this stuff just kind of comes together and you get lost in the moment. It's not to bring up the music and the work that Matt did on this film. Just talk a little bit about how he approached it and what he used to do it. For those that don't know and did the research I did, it's pretty wild for you to compose.
Yeah, so Matt Morton is our music composer, and the soundtrack comes out tomorrow too, by the way. And then they're going to do like a big vinyl release, I think, too. Which would be
No
cool.
way.
Yeah,
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, the anniversary later on. But again, I'm so proud of him as I am all the team. But I've known Matt since we were in elementary school. We grew up in Columbus, Ohio, and you couldn't have like walked down the street, and not heard the name Neil Armstrong or John Glenn, all these astronauts. So Matt has this amazing basement in Columbus, Ohio, that's just filled with like just every instrument you can imagine. And usually we do post scoring for our films. I'll temp something in, give it to him, he'll post score it. And give it back. It's always spot on. And for this one, he goes, I just want to do a period score with modern composition. I go, okay, Matt, you know, I didn't know exactly what he was talking about. Hour-long Moog synthesized compositions. From an editing standpoint, it was great. Like, I could just play with like tone, structure. And once he kind of got really good at it, we started talking about how it could be the voice of things that we couldn't, fill in the gaps in some places.
Right.
He's like me, you know, we like films where you don't necessarily see the fingerprints of the filmmakers, and particularly with this, it's like, you got great footage, you got great sound, just stand out of the way of it and just let it breathe. But there were moments during some of the burns that happened, there's very complex maneuvers that happen in space, and we talked about Matt's music being a voice, you know, of the spacecraft, and having, you know, driving the scene. Because the astronauts, quite frankly, are, you know, the nerves of steel. Their hearts are racing, but on comm, on the loops, they sound like they're just having a cup of coffee with you.
That was one of my favorite details, is when you would get the heart rates of the astronauts slightly like before or after the landing or during the launch. Was it Neil was at 88 or was that Buzz? I think Buzz was at 88.
Buzz was 88 on the launch.
Buzz was 88 on the launch. Buzz's heart rate during the launch was cool 88. I go up to like 92 having a cheese stick upstairs in the snack room.
The day of the launch, in large format, when you see that, and I've seen some of those images over the decades multiple times, it just, you know, it just kind of never really hit me. But when you see it in that kind of quality, you just see the weight of the world written all over these guys' faces and what they're about to do and how they represent all of us. And it feels to me, and I was never lost on it in the edit suite. You know, late at night I'd be sitting there and I'm just like, God, what would have been going through these guys' heads? I mean, luckily, you know, I got to talk to them about it, but certainly it just had to be just a tremendous, you know, as Walter Cronkite says in the film, the burden and the hopes of all mankind, and that's exactly what it was. And you see it, you know, written on their faces, and that goes for everyone that was there. You know, people that are watching the launch, they were having a great time. This is like, you know, this is like, wow, this is a Super Bowl of all Super Bowls.
Yeah.
You know? And then when you see those flight controllers, you know, in the room, and you see their faces in that kind of quality, it really drives home, you know, the accomplishment, and also how they're part of this entire network that all work together to do this amazing thing and to represent all of us. And it was just really quite extraordinary.
Yeah, I love the beach sequence. It's just the spectator stuff that I've never seen before. Just regular people that day waiting for this moment, kind of watching them wake up to the sunrise on the beach and the hood or the roof of their cars and stuff, and fixing their hair, and just all that. Just such a moment in time. And it's something that really hit me when I was talking about in the green room, is like, a lot of people today are like, oh, you know, America comes together in a time of tragedy, you know, Great War, whatever it is, what it takes to get everybody to band back together, we need confidence. Like, nah, dude, that's not, everybody in the world got together because we were going to space. We were doing something we'd never done before. And literally, you get to see in this film, everyone come together for that one moment in time, be on the same page, like, I can't believe, like, we're all doing this, like, it's a real deal. And it's a beautiful moment. Hang on 1 second, it wasn't in the film, but you talked to the astronaut, you talked to Buzz, or what was that conversation like?
Yeah, it was great. There were certain things, I mean, just reading their autobiographies, you know, interviews over the years, there were certain things that I wanted to see depicted in the space film that I had never seen depicted before. So it was, you know, pleasure of my life to, you know, design a scene, show it to Buzz or my colleagues, and get immediate feedback. Well, that works, this doesn't. For instance, during the landing, there's a scene where there's two alarms that are going off, the 1202 and 1201 alarms.
Yeah.
And you see everyone reacting to that in real time. We have, we didn't talk about it, but there was over 11,000 hours of audio related to mission control that we were given a couple of months into the project. So rifling through that was really an amazing feat by the team. But there's backroom engineers. A 24-year-old flight controller that was reporting to his flight controller. His name's Jack Garman, who gave the abort or no abort or the go command to keep on going. And it was him alone. No one knew what these alarms were. But the actual tone of the alarms, I figured there had to be something, because an audible tone of some sort, we were asking the experts, nobody really knew. Bill Berry and his group, Buzz had confirmed, yes, there was something in their headsets. So we went back to NASA they gave us a document a short time later, and it had the actual kilohertz tone that was going through the headset. We gave that to our sound designers. They could replicate it. We could show it to Buzz. Is this when you were in the limb, with the headset on? Is this what it sounded like? Is this too much? Is this too little? And we did that for a number of different scenes. The translunar injection maneuver, a fancy way of saying they just light the candle to go to the moon. So the rocket, launches. They do a couple of orbits around the Earth, and then they do this burn. It's a very important burn. It's called a J2 engine. It lights and ignites. And it's always depicted in Hollywood as kind of a standard thing. It's not. It's a very big thing. You're leaving low Earth orbit. You're leaving everything you've ever known. It's all in the rearview mirror. But what's extraordinary about it, most of the Apollo missions, they did it on the dark side of the Earth, and they all talk about it, and you hear it on the onboard audio. In fact, Armstrong himself goes, "We're passing right over the Terminator," meaning the dark part of the Earth into the light part of Earth, where the sunrise is happening. Gene Cernan on 17 described it as TL-ing right into sunrise. I'd never seen it depicted before, and I damn well wanted to see it depicted in my film. So luckily we found they didn't shoot it on Apollo 11. I asked Mike Collins and Buzz Aldrin about it to describe it. We showed them some examples, and sure enough, there was another Apollo mission where they actually shot it, and that's what's depicted in the film. And then add that in with the exact telemetry on how fast, in miles per hour, it's going with the countdown of the engine, going. And it was just, again, we had Buzz here actually in New York shortly before we debuted at Sundance to screen the entire thing, just not pieces. And it was just like the joy of my life to talk to him about that. What did we get right? What did we get wrong? Because I was in revision mode at that point. And lucky to say, he loved it, and it was so gratifying. It was great to work with those guys. And Neil's sons, Rick and Mark, the first people I showed any footage to when we first had it. Get on a plane with a laptop, go show Neil's sons, and and of course they've just been so gracious with their time since, and it's been an absolute pleasure to work with those guys.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to hang out and talk to you, man. I want to thank you, one, not just for being here, but two, for making this movie. It's not just a beautiful movie. You've done a great thing for us as a society to have this. It was just sitting in a pile before you guys put in the blood, sweat, and tears to turn it into this, and now we get to experience it and relive it and see it through fresh eyes, man. It's something that's just so amazing and so beautiful. Congratulations on this film. It is wide release this week. It's coming out. The soundtrack's coming out. If you can find the biggest screen you can find, people, and go watch this film. And it is a beautiful thing. I'm getting the signal. I'm going to wrap it up. Apollo